I'm here to deliver a biology lesson to you today on topic 2.1. Those in my chemistry class will be familiar with the format by now. I deliver a little virtual video lesson to you here from my little office room at home. As I said, this lesson will cover the first part of topic 2.1. Very briefly to begin with, just want to quickly check that you're all up to date and with everything that I'd set previously and remind you of what you should have done by now. In the initial 2 week of the college closure, you should have completed what is shown here. This is just a copy of the email that I sent you, which basically meant completing topic 3.3 as well as doing a few homeworks and a test. I then sent you a further email at the beginning of the Easter holidays giving you 3 further tasks to do over Easter. You got the summary notes there. Hope you have done those, by the way. It is really important to review and consolidate learning as soon as possible after you've done it. But then there were 2 other things. Was the tracking sheet, showing you a copy of it here. I did suggest that we use this time that we've got available to really get this tracking sheet fully up to date and fully up to standard. What that means is if you want to get a B in biology, you ensure that not only have you recorded all your marks here, but if any piece of work was not up to B grade standard, you go back and do corrections on it. Don't necessarily need to redo the whole thing, but you correct questions you got wrong and then remark it. The mark schemes for all the question sheets, homeworks, tests are all on Moodle. As I've said several times, if you really want a B, not just wish for a B, then that's one way of ensuring that you achieve it. You should have done everything covering up to the end of topic 3.3 on this tracking sheet. Lastly, I also mentioned directed study, and I did send you a copy of this. This is something I've probably not mentioned as much as I should have. I've given you the sheet and I have mentioned it a couple of times over the course of the year, but really this being directed study is work that you're meant to do for yourselves in your own time, but not have to hand in to the teacher. Now, if you've got way behind on this and not been keeping up with it at all, then I suggest you use the next 4 weeks to try to get it all done. Set yourself a little schedule by which you can get all of this done by the end of the next 4 weeks. That would strictly be by Sunday the 17th of May. Now, some of these tasks mention creating revision cards or summary notes. You may have already done that, of course, but do the tasks you've not yet done. Right, on to today's lesson. As I mentioned in the email, before you've even started watching this video, you should have already gone onto Moodle and downloaded sheet 2.1.1 and checked the answers to that. You've also printed off a copy of the 2.1 note sheets and then watch the 2 videos I sent you. There's the long click view video for half an hour, but it's an excellent video which covers all the opening concepts of this topic really thoroughly. Whilst watching that, plus the second shorter YouTube video I sent you, you should have completed all of page 1 of this note sheet and the top bit of page 2 on the binomials. Right, just a quick recap of what you should have learnt so far, just from completing that first sheet and watching the 2 videos. Early classification systems split all living organisms into only 2 kingdoms, and that meant the fungi and bacteria were shoved in with the plants. However, as time went on, it became apparent that this wasn't really a valid system, and we moved on to a system of 5 kingdom classification. You've got the Monera, the bacteria, in other words, single-cell eukaryotes. You've then got the fungi, the plants and the animals, fungi largely being heterotrophic but saprophytic, that is, they release enzymes outside of their body, digest the food outside of their body, then absorb it. You've got plants, which of course carry out photosynthesis, animals, which are heterotrophic and are motile as well. You've got this final kingdom, the protists. There's quite a lot of controversy over the protists, actually. Different biologists put different organisms in there. Some biologists reserve it entirely for single-celled eukaryotes, as opposed to single-celled prokaryotes, that's the monerans. But other biologists actually put some simple multicellular organisms in there. Still got to be eukaryotic, but these are multicellular organisms where all the cells are identical. They're not split into separate tissues, and that means you get types of algae like Spirogyra are put in there. Even some biologists will put certain types of seaweed in there. In all these organisms, basically they're multicellular, but actually the cells don't really have much to do with each other. There's little or no communication with each other. It's a group of cells all living independent existences but happen to be attached to each other. Now, some biologists, or many in fact, consider this kingdom to be a bit of an unsatisfactory arrangement, and that really there are many organisms in this kingdom which have little relation to each other, and it's sort of a bit almost of a waste bin kingdom where anything that doesn't fit into any other kingdoms gets shoved in, and it possibly should be split into a larger number of groups. But anyway, we're stuck with it, and certainly your exam board would need you to know that it is single-celled eukaryotes plus some multicellular eukaryotes where the body is not divided into tissues. To further complicate matters, yeast are single-celled eukaryotes and they're put in the fungi. But that is because their biochemistry, their method of reproduction, their method of nutrition is so similar to the rest of the fungi that it's considered appropriate to put them in there. You then went on to learn from the YouTube video that actually many scientists have come up with an updated system of classification and said, look, the basic division of life should not be into 5 kingdoms. There should be a fundamental division above the level of kingdom even into what are called 3 domains. And that far from putting all the bacteria together in one kingdom, they should be split into 2 different domains, the eubacteria, or sometimes called the bacteria or true bacteria, and the archaea, which have such significant differences to the true bacteria. They're considered a separate domain. You've then got all the other 4 kingdoms, protists, fungi, plants, animals, in the eukaryota. And this type of classification will put the level of kingdom below the level of domain. You'll also have learnt that many archaea are what we call extremophiles, organisms which can survive at extremes of temperature, possibly pH, salt levels as well. Moving on from that, you've then got on to learn about the classification hierarchy, because after all, dividing living things into the 5 kingdoms isn't the end of our efforts to classify them. We break kingdoms down into different phyla, squid and mollusks, horses or chordates, etc. And we then break phyla down into different classes. The chordate phyla, 5 main classes: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals. Horses, of course, being mammals. But each of those classes are then divided into orders and then into families, genera and species. So what you end up with is a classification hierarchy like this, and you do have to remember those 7 different groupings, kingdom being the largest kingdom, divided into phyla, phyla into classes, and so on. This shows the full classification of the wolf. By the way, as you can see, chordate mammals, we already mentioned. Carnivora, a large order containing all the dogs, cats, even hyenas, bears are in there. You've got family Canidae, the dog-like Carnivora, and then the genus and the species. Similarly, got the full classification of us here as well. Again, we're mammals, but this time primates. Hominidae are the great apes, and you then got our genus and species. There are various mnemonics you can use to remember that order. By the way, you could look this up on Google and see loads of them. You can see one there. I prefer ones like this, which start with King Philip myself. But anyway, look them up on Google and choose whichever one works for you. Right, you've then gone on to learn about the binomial system, by which all species are given two names. The first name, the name of their genus, beginning with a capital. Second, the name of the species, beginning with a small letter, same shown there, sometimes abbreviated to just the first letter of the name of the genus, Canis for the wolf. This system was brought in the 18th century by a scientist called Carl von Linné from Sweden, actually. Brought in to address the fact that scientists in different countries would give different names to the same organisms, and there was a need to have a uniform naming system. So he brought in this binomial system, and most names of species were based on Latin words. So obsessed was Linnaeus, or should I say von Linné, with giving everything Latinised names. He even changed his own name and Latinised it from Carl von Linné. He just became known as Linnaeus. Finally, you've learnt about the definition of a species, because it can sometimes be a bit tricky to decide, are two different organisms members of two different species, or are they just members of two different subspecies? For example, you've got a mountain gorilla there on the left, or a lowland gorilla. Now they're only subspecies, they're both members of the same species, whereas below that you've got a chimp and sorry, just moved down a bit. You've got a chimp and a pygmy chimp. Sure, there was some sort of superimposing going on this. But anyway, these are different species, whereas the gorillas aren't. They're only subspecies. Why is that? Well, to be members of the same species, organisms must be capable of reproducing to produce fertile offspring. Two types of gorilla can do that. Chimps and pygmy chimps, or bonobos as they're often called, cannot reproduce with each other and produce fertile offspring. Fertile offspring bit is crucial, by the way. No prizes for guessing what this animal is a mixture of. It's called a liger, and it is produced when a lion and a tiger reproduced. The thing with ligers is, actually interestingly, the females usually are fertile, but the males are sterile. But because the males are sterile, lions and tigers are considered to be separate species. As for these two characters, the dog and the wolf, they are usually classified as separate species, Canis lupus and Canis familiaris, but actually they can interbreed to produce fertile offspring, and really they should just be different subspecies, not different species. Right, everything I've mentioned so far on this video has been either just a recap of previous work you should have done over the previous 4 weeks, or recapping what you should have got from the videos. You might be forgiven for thinking, why am I even bothering to watch this video? I'm not learning anything new. Well, if you were thinking that, shame on you, because you are going to learn something new now. Now, I want to teach you about phylogenetic trees. Now, there's a classification here of the not the great apes, of the primates. Some members of the primate order, I've shown you their classification here. You'll see there's a number of, within the order, there's a number of superfamilies within the primates. I'll also show you on this chart here. You've got the great apes, which includes humans, gorillas, chimps, and orangutans. You've got the gibbons, which are considered to be lesser apes, but they're still part of our superfamily, the apes. Then you've got other superfamilies, Old World monkeys, New World monkeys, and a few other groups. Different Old World and New World, by the way. Old World just means Africa plus Europe, Asia. New World is the Americas. Anyway, there's a number of super families. This list here does not show every single primate, just a selection of them, showing some members of the superfamily Hominoidae, the apes, and some members of the Old World monkeys. Now, within the superfamily Hominoidae, you've got the family Hominidae, the great apes, then you've got the Hylobatidae, the lesser apes, or the gibbons. Now, crucial point to make here. Why is it, for example, that humans, chimps, gorillas, orangutans are in the same family, but the gibbons are in a different family? For that matter, why is it that the Old World monkeys aren't even in the same super family? Well, there's a vital point to make here, and that is that classification must reflect evolution. To further explain this, let's go back to this phylogenetic tree. You'll see there is actually a scale on this side. Now, at some point, a long time ago, about 25 million years ago actually, there was a common ancestor of the Old World monkeys and all of the apes. But that common ancestor lived a long time ago. So Old World monkeys are fairly distantly related to the apes. On the other hand, common ancestor of the gibbons and all the great apes lived about 15 million years ago. So in other words, gibbons share a more recent common ancestor with the great apes than the Old World monkeys do. And because they share a more recent common ancestor, they are more closely related to us in the classification system. Therefore, they're put in the same family, just reiterating the fact that classification must reflect evolution. Gibbons, though, are put in the same superfamily as us, but not in the same family. That's because we shared a common ancestor with them 15 million years ago. The orangutans share a common ancestor with all the other great apes, which lived maybe around 8 or 9 million years ago. Because the orangutans share a more recent common ancestor with the gorilla than the gibbons do, then the orangutans are classified in the same family as the gorilla. Now, there's a crucial point to make here. You could well be given exam questions which would say something like, explain why the orangutan and the gorilla are in the same family, but the gibbon is in a different family. Simple answer is the orangutan and the gorilla share a more recent common ancestor. That is always the crucial phrase you've got to get down. Because they share a more recent common ancestor is always the answer as to why two organisms are put in the same classification group, whereas a third one is left out of that group. Right, I want to teach you how to draw and interpret phylogenetic trees now. That's the name given to the type of diagram which we just looked at. Example of one here as well, a diagram which shows the evolutionary history of different organisms. Now, I've sent you this document which shows the classification of some members of the order Carnivora, just some of the cats family, certain members of the cat family and certain members of the dog family only. This is by no means the entirety of the dog and cat families, just selected organisms. Now, if you were asked to draw a phylogenetic tree based on this, going to just rotate my phone here, you may have to rotate your screen, I'm afraid. First thing you'll notice is that there are two separate families. So the first thing I've done is split the tree into two lineages reflecting the two different families, and I've put all the dog family on this lineage, or the cat family coming from this one. You'll then notice that within the cat family there are two subfamilies, the small cats and the big cats. So I've again done a split here at the subfamily level. Now within that, the small cat subfamily, you've got two genera, which again I've then shown there. The small cat one is split into two genera, and lastly the Felis genus has two species here. So if we look at the small cat classification, that's exactly what I've shown. Two genera, one the lynx genus, one the cat genus, if you like, the true cat genus, and then you've got the fact that the true cats are split into the domestic cat and the wild cat. Now, similar things apply to the big cats. You've got two different genera, and then the Panthera genera has two species. So that's exactly what I've shown there. Look how I've tried to sort of be organised with it and get the species split lined up and the genus split lined up and so on. Going on back onto the dogs, there's no subfamily split here, just two genera, and the first one, the Canis genus, split into two species. So I've got no subfamily split, but I've got the two genera and then the Canis genus split into two species. Let's have a quick look at the whole of this thing. Right, I've sort of repositioned and refocused slightly. Hopefully you can see the entirety of that chart now and appreciate everything that I've said. See how I've tried to be organised. I've got a subfamily split there, the genus split all here, species split there. And again, this chart, would reflect evolutionary history. The cat and the wild cat share a recent common ancestor, whereas the cat and the lynx have a more distant common ancestor. Hence, because the cat and the wild cat share a recent common ancestor, they're in the same genus. Cat and the lynx have a more distant common ancestor, so not in the same genus, only in the same subfamily. But the cat and the lynx do at least have a more recent common ancestor than they do with the big cats. The domestic cat and a lion, for example, have a far more distant common ancestor, and therefore they're not even in the same subfamily. Even put some dates on here actually just to emphasise the point. Cat and the wild cat, common ancestor a million years ago, relatively recent, same genus. Cat and the lynx, 7 million years. Cat and the lion, for example, 14 million years, was a common ancestor shared by even cats and dogs right back to about 65 million years ago. Right, task for you now. I've sent you this document attached to the email showing the classification of certain members of the primate order. By no means all of the primates. It's not quite the same list that I showed you earlier. Could you use this to generate your own phylogenetic tree showing the evolutionary history of the organisms in this list, please? Pause the video, come back when you've finished. Right, this is what you should have come up with. I'll let you just have a good look at it, pause the video, have a good look, check your answers against it. Shouldn't hopefully be any need for me to explain it again, as I did all the explaining on the previous one for the cats and dogs. Right, I should add that whilst it's sufficient for the purpose of my exercise to show phylogenetic trees like this with the divisions happening just at the different levels of the classification hierarchy, many phylogenetic trees can actually be far more precise and actually show specific dates at which common ancestors lived and at which splits occurred. You can see this here. This is another one for the big cats, actually. And for example, you've got various different big cats here, lions, tigers, leopards, etc. And they're showing the different dates at which they split. They're not having to just, on this one, they're not just splitting all 5 species at the same point in time. They're showing that certain species are more closely related to each other, even though they're all in the same genus, and actually some species, even in the same genus, have more recent common ancestors than others. Similar on this one that I showed you earlier, where you've got an actual time scale, and they're even showing within the great apes that the different genera didn't all split from each other at the same time. And you can see which species share more recent common ancestors than others. Right, that's just about it from me for today. You should now just be able to go on and complete some further work, of course. Complete this part on the aim of classification, and then draw a sample phylogenetic tree, just a simple one. And then go on to complete, as I mentioned in the email, sections A and B on the question sheet also, please. Referred to on that question sheet are certain activity pack tasks, but you can get this from the usual place on Moodle. You can download it from there and print off relevant pages if you like. You've also got the answers there, and you've got available on Moodle also the answers to the question sheet that I sent you. Okay, that will do for today. I'll try to post another video in a few days' time covering further parts of topic 2.1. Okay, all the best everyone, goodbye.